Welcome back to Small College Conversations. I'm Kristen Eargle. I'm joined by Kris Swogger, Keiser's Director of Athletics. Thanks for being on today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, the last time we visited, we talked about, you emphasized your shared vision for success, teaching student athletes that championship mindset. Let's go back to that a little bit. Focusing on those goals and objectives to develop that mindset. Obviously, it's working for you guys. Been racking up a lot of titles over there at Keiser. A little bit about how are you measuring that goal now?
Really, we talk about everything that leads up to the championship and up to the end of the season. So for us, there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff outside of athletics. So whether that's class attendance, grade checks, student life check-in, stuff like that. So really how you do one thing is how you do everything. And so we want to make sure that the habits that are developing, at the beginning of the day to the end of the day are something that, leads them to being a better person and ultimately lead them to where they want to get to on the field.
What specific strategies are in the messages seem to really be resonating with your coaches and student athletes?
Really we're preparing them for life. So I think in a world where college athletics is kind of the unknown, I feel like every week, every month, something changes, at least at the highest level, and eventually will trickle down. So really, I think it's refocusing on why it is you got into this and why are you here, right? And so for all of our coaches, they played, someone impacted their life, someone motivated them to be better than they were, and really that's why they got into coaching, was to have that same impact on other students. So we constantly just refocus, make sure that you control the things that you can control. I was having a conversation with a coach today, and at the end of the day, you get to nationals, you get to a point where you have a chance to compete. There's some things that are out of your control, and it's just the way it goes sometimes, whether that be weather or the draw or whatever, but control the controllable and those things for us are how our student athletes carry themselves, how hard they work, the effort they put in, and just making sure we're representing the university and their families the right way.
And talk a little bit about the culture that you've implemented. How do you kind of manage that? Obviously, when you come in, you take over as a director of athletics for many years, you set some things into place. And then how do you manage that on a weekly basis or on a daily basis?
I was fortunate enough that I took over after Nick Davidson, who was, a great mentor and someone that, is with the NAIA now. So he had set a good foundation. For me, it was as we've grown and as we've added sports and as the campus has continued to thrive, number one is just kind of make sure our policies, procedures, and standard is set so it's easy to find and easy to read. So no one's questioning what they're supposed to be doing on a day-to-day basis. We're constantly revamping that, especially with technology, making it easier. But then it's having, constant conversations. We have bi-weekly meetings with myself and my administrators. They have sport assignments. And so we're meeting on a bi-weekly basis about pretty much everything but the season. So whether that's budgets, grades, academic performance, or just personal life, we're just kind of making sure we have touch points. And if we need to meet before that, we can. But, you can't let a day go by without having a conversation about something. Again, we have 800 student athletes. So there's a lot that goes on. And so by the time you kind of circle back around, you're having daily conversations.
You're in a part of the country that's absolutely gorgeous to live. I've lived in Miami before, so you're in West Palm. But then on the flip side, if you think about fundraising and supporting athletic department, there's a lot of competition out there in South Florida for a lot of things people could invest in. So where have you found the most momentum in terms of fundraising?
Yeah, it is a challenge. I mean, we're competing with a lot down here, whether it be pro sports, college athletics, or just the weather. But I think one of the advantages is the location. So we've had a lot of success with our sports commission in West Palm Beach, helping to help bring events and partner with them to have large tournaments, summer camps, things like that, where we've been able to generate revenue because people want to come down. I think as we've grown, not only in West Palm, but we have, over 20 campuses in the state. So there's also some opportunities there for some vendors and some different restaurants and hotel partners that are a little bit unique to our situation because we are located in multiple places where we've been able to partner with them as well for revenue and exposure as well.
Wow, that's really cool. Talking about the fifth year of eligibility, some of the NAIA news, it was ultimately withdrawn. You expressed at some point just kind of some criticism towards that. It was obviously partially for NAIA to differentiate itself, while D2 was thinking about a similar idea. As a leader in this space, are there some ideas or changes that you think the NAIA could benefit from?
Yeah, I mean, I had a few issues with that. One of them, though, was just I don't like the idea of creating a policy just to differentiate. I mean, it's got to make sense for the student athlete. It's got to make sense for the association. So I think policy wise, the things that I think we need to look at right now is for postseason is the second auto bid for conferences. Right now, if you have a large conference, you get a second auto bid. I think getting rid of that would benefit not only the quality of the tournament, because you'd have more at larges, but I worry a little bit about larger conferences. What tends to happen is if once you get to a certain size and your schedule is basically filled, you don't have cross conference matchups. You kind of box other people in certain regions of the country in where they now have to jump over 5 states to get games, and they start to really question, does this make sense for us? So I think that would help. I think the other thing is looking at the way we do postseason reimbursement, or at least how it costs. I think that's probably one of the biggest differentiators between the D2 and D1 level, or D2 and NAIA, is the championship expense part of it. And if you are very successful, it is very expensive. And so I would question how many schools could afford that. If they were to continue to rise or want to get better, I don't know if it's sustainable. And then just from a marketability standpoint, I think we have a great product. Small college athletics, I think resonates probably more with some people now than it did before. That at the higher level, it seems to be more of a professional model. And so I think if we can find ways to market ourselves better through broadcast streams, get our product in front of people at a high quality level, I think it'll help grow, our association and bring exposure to our universities.
Going back to your second point, which is the financial piece of championships, what could be done there?
So for football, it's unique. We actually have, I guess you consider an insurance policy is the best way to describe it. So depending upon how you finish the year before, you pay a certain amount, and it all goes into a pot to help offset the cost. So that's worked well for football. For the other sports, depending upon what, whether that's regionalization of opening rounds, shrinking the fields, or just figuring out a way that, I don't know for some of the sports, because if you don't have an opening round, you don't have some of the money coming in for reimbursement. But, I definitely think that if you don't do something, then eventually the cost and the burden, because we're all looking at, especially for small colleges, and every day you hear about another one that's closed down, is they're looking for ways to minimize expenses, but you also want to provide the opportunity. So if the expense side of a sport gets to be too high, I would worry that schools are going to start thinking about, is it feasible to have this? And that's what you don't want, is you don't want opportunities to go away for student athletes.
And you talked about adding sports within your time. What are some of the criteria that you look at when adding sports? Obviously, the balance between supporting championships and then facilities.
Yeah, so obviously, like when we added our turf field in football, it was kind of natural to add men's lacrosse, women's lacrosse, and eventually flag football. We had the facility, we had the turf field. They all go hand in hand, fall sport versus spring sport. So from a staffing perspective, that one was, we added some, but it made sense because of the offset in the seasons. Since I've been here, we've added men's, women's swimming, men's, women's lacrosse, wrestling, flag football, and I think that's it, but I may be leaving one out. So, I think looking at the conference level and who's offering it was also one of the considerations. Or are they going to offer it soon? Because, you want to make sure from a logistical standpoint, your schedule isn't set up where you're traveling all over the country. Unfortunately for lacrosse, we were like that when we first started, but now that more programs are adding, it's getting to the point where we can stay a little bit more regional, and the trips aren't quite as extensive as going from here to Indiana a couple of times a year. Although we were just there on the men's side, so I can't say we never go.
Okay, so what tips would you give an athletic director who's starting a sport right now?
One, I'd say ask someone else who has it. I mean, I think we did. I ask a lot of people, just kind of get an idea on your starting expenses and things that you need versus what's going to be something that you have to budget for down the road. And again, where is the sport going? Flag football is a perfect example. When we added flag, it was kind of on the front end. There weren't a lot of schools that had it. The Sun Conference was one of the first conferences to put it at a large scale, but it's blowing up. It was one of those sports that was very popular in the state, had a lot of participation, relatively easy from a game management standpoint. It's fan friendly. So all those things kind of check the boxes on something that was easy to pull off, was able to keep us recruiting in the state and keep some of those kids at home. But also there was a conference alignment there where we knew we would get a certain amount of games and also be able to travel, outside. I think we've gone as far as Kansas. And then this weekend we're actually in Georgia. So we still travel, but it makes more sense to have, some local teams that we can play against.
Let's talk about you personally. You started out at FIU, is that right? And got your master's there, I believe you said, and then worked your way up at Keiser. Talk to me about that experience there, obviously working at a very large institution and in Keiser now, some of the things maybe you drew from there that you're utilizing now.
Yeah, I mean, so when I was there, I was a graduate assistant. I worked in marketing, and FIU it may have grown, but at the time it was a D1, but much smaller than, my undergrad was at Florida State. So Florida State was just more siloed in the departments. So I was lucky to get to work there at a time where I got to work with compliance, eligibility, game operations, as well as marketing. So a lot of the experiences from there I brought over. I think the biggest thing was not to make it a silo. I think the advantage when I was there was, even though it was a larger school, I did get to meet and interact with a lot of different departments. So I kind of understood how they worked. And so as we've grown here, we've tried to keep that the same. We're NAIA, but we have over 60 full-time employees. People's schedules are crazy. So sometimes if you don't intentionally go to talk to someone, you don't see them for a while. So I think the more interaction that the staff can have, one, it makes their job just more enjoyable. But the other part is I think they understand how they impact everybody else. And so for any organization to move forward, everyone has to understand they play a role that impacts someone else. Sometimes you have to pick up the slack. Sometimes you got to be the one carrying the weight. But as a team, that's how we move forward. And so that was probably the biggest thing, was just kind of realizing that we had to keep that small continuity together to be able to move forward.
You look back now and it's been 10 years, are you in your 10th year there as an AD?
Yes. Yeah. So Keiser University took over Northwood in 2015. I was here prior to that. And then I took over as AD officially in 2016. Wow. So it's been 10 years.
10 years. I mean, does it seem like a fast 10 years or like a lot has happened in this time period?
No, it does. I mean, because within that you had the COVID era. So that whole 2-year gap was crazy. We played. So Sun Conference was one of the only teams that played a season in the fall. So we played our fall season and then all of our championships landed in the spring. So we kind of had, 2 or 3 seasons at once. Since I've been here, I've had, 2 of my kids have been born. So it's flown by, but at the same time, there's a lot of things you look at that you're grateful for, as far as just growth on campus and just, as you build relationships and you talk to people and that, they've been around for a while and we've had a lot of retention, which is great. It's great.
When you think about it, what do you think? Was it the COVID year that was one of some of the toughest adversity you faced or toughest challenge in this decade of leadership? Is there something else that popped up?
I mean, to be honest with you, prior to the last 2 years, I'd probably say COVID, but recently I think just with the uncertainty at the Division I level with whether it be transfer portal, transfers in general, getting extra years of eligibility if you were not at a D1 level versus D2. I mean, I think all that, there's just instability with how the rules are applied and can you get a waiver and can you not? So I'd say that's probably been the biggest challenge just because you don't know what's going to come next. And not that we did with COVID, but I think with COVID, it was all encompassing. So everyone on campus was meeting, conferences were meeting, schools were meeting. So it was kind of a collective effort to get through it. Now, you make a decision one day and a week later, there's a new rule that passed or a policy that changed, which again trickles down. And now all of a sudden you may have to pivot and turn. So I'd say right now it's not the same challenge, but it is a little bit difficult to try to figure out the future and how you're going to build rosters and where you're going to recruit and how you're going to recruit, not knowing what's ultimately going to happen.
How do you personally handle that? I mean, how do you stay steady when you're trying to communicate all this different information to your team? How do you keep up with all the changes?
Well, there's a lot of rumors and a lot of things that fly. So obviously stick to what passes versus what may pass. Again, I think, going back to what we talked about at the beginning is just having a standard, recruiting kids that want to be here, regardless of if a rule changes or not. And you never know, but you want to make sure you're bringing the kid that wants to be here, whether that be for their major, location, the coach itself, but that's going to tie them here. We're also, one of the things we're looking at now just with AI is getting our forms tighter so we can kind of project, not only like look back at what was successful, but then also project what will be successful down the road. So we're trying to get ahead of that a little bit just so we can be a little bit more intentional in some of the decisions we make.
Wow, fascinating. Okay, so what are you looking at for the next couple of years? What's on your agenda?
Campus-wide, we're growing. So we're adding dormitories, we're adding academic buildings, really trying to grow our non-student athlete population through a variety of ways, grad school, online, and on campus. So right now, from a campus-wide initiative, that's what we're focusing on. Athletically, once that gets done, obviously there will be some upgrades of facilities and capital campaigns we'll be coming out with. So that'll kind of be the next spend, I guess you could say. And then from a, just day to day with our student athletes, I mean, really it's just making sure we're continuing to update policies and procedures and just stuff as things evolve. When I look at what we had in place a few years ago, we haven't changed a lot, but we have changed with the times a little bit, right? A kid that is an entering freshman in 2026 is a lot different than one that was in 2018. So we just have to make sure that we're adjusting with them, not on a standard, but more on what it's going to take for them to be successful, how they interact with us, how they want to be communicated with, what they're used to and comfortable with. And the kid may change a little bit as far as where we're getting them from, but we just want to make sure that we're, they're home away from home and that we're doing everything we can to help them to be successful in whatever career they choose when they get done.
All right, let's talk about leadership. Final question for you. If you could kind of give some leadership advice, you're having tremendous success there at Keiser. And if you think about it, you worked your way up there at the institution and have been there a sustained amount of time. Sometimes that's rare in our business. Mm-hmm. Talk to the younger professional right now who's watching this and saying, I would like to be where you are today. What are some things that you could do at your job right now to position you for one day taking that chair?
Well, I think a couple things. One, the first thing is, treat every day like a job interview. So, I'll tell GAs or kids all the time, like, you don't know who you're going to be working with on a day-to-day basis that later may be someone who you're trying to get a job for, or, hey, may need to give you a recommendation. And so sometimes I think people will think if I'm not going into a job interview, I don't need to dress a certain way, talk a certain way, I can do whatever. But, everyone's watching. So I would say, just treat every day like a job interview. You never know who you're going to impress. Be more qualified in your current job than you need to be. So sometimes people think when I get the job, then I'll be better at X, Y, Z. And really you need to be overqualified in your current job for someone to have faith to promote you that you're going to do well in whatever new responsibility they're going to give you. And then I think for me, the big thing that I did learn from Nick was, hire the right people regardless. Sometimes people are scared of hiring someone who has been an AD before or wants to be an AD or has qualifications that are higher maybe than the job. But, I want everyone around me to be better than me. I'm not worried that if they're more qualified, I'm worried about my job. At the end of the day, that makes my job easier if they know what they're doing. I've been lucky to have that. And so I think sometimes when you're hiring, you want to make sure that you have a staff that is almost overqualified. And if they end up moving on, then that means they probably did a great job where they're at. And I know turnover, sometimes people don't want to hear that, but I'd rather have a great employee that moves on than a bad employee who is here forever. So, I think as people get into leadership roles, whether that be hiring coaches or staff, it's just hire the best possible people that fit your culture and work with them to build something and then help them to be successful. And if they stay, great. If they end up moving on, then they benefited you as well.
Wow. Great wisdom. Kris, thank you so much for your time. Continued success in West Palm.
Thank you.